April 15th, 2025, 8:42 a.m. The skies over Belarus erupted in fire. A B-2 Spirit, America's $2.1 billion stealth bomber, was erased in just 7 seconds. Russia's S-500 locked on. A missile rose at Mach 14, and the impossible happened. Stealth had fallen. Wreckage rained for miles, villages burned, and in Washington one phrase flashed across Pentagon screens: Raven down. How did Russia achieve the unthinkable, and could its shield survive the brutal U.S. response that followed? April 15, 2025, 8:40 a.m. Military District, Smolensk Oblast. Altitude, 50,000 feet. Heading, 312 degrees northwest. Speed, 560 knots. Call sign, Ghost 12. On the edge of Belarusian airspace, the B-2 Spirit cut across the upper atmosphere, invisible to the naked eye. Its radar cross-section was the size of a bird, its black wing blending with the pale horizon. Inside the cockpit, the crew watched calm green screens. To them, it was a routine patrol, one of dozens flown in recent months to remind Moscow that stealth still ruled the skies. Deep underground, 80 miles away in a reinforced bunker near Smolensk, Russian radar operators scanned the glowing sweep of their consoles. The 90N6 AM acquisition radar hummed on its 20-meter mast. At first, there was nothing, just the usual clutter of weather returns and migratory birds. Then, at 8:42:17, one operator leaned closer. A flicker, a faint thermal echo, no larger than a speck of dust. He called out the coordinates. Target suspected, bearing 277, altitude 50,000. The crew chief stepped forward, heart pounding. For years, their training drills had ended in frustration. Now, something was different. He authorized a tracking lock. The system's algorithms confirmed a target silhouette, minimal radar return, high-altitude flight, steady velocity. Within 7.2 seconds, the computer issued its verdict. Probability of hostile stealth bomber, 94%. The order was given. From a hidden silo in the forests outside Yelnya, a 77 N6N1 anti-air missile roared skyward. The earth trembled as the 33-foot interceptor left its tube, spewing a pillar of fire. Its speed climbed past Mach 5, Mach 10, Mach 14, nearly 5 kilometers per second. Above the clouds, the missile's seeker head switched on, chasing the faint heat signature of jet exhaust. At 8:43 a.m., 40 kilometers above the Earth, the two paths intersected. The warhead detonated, scattering over 2,000 tungsten fragments in a cone of fire. To villagers on the ground, it looked like a second sun. The sky bloomed orange-white, brighter than lightning, followed by a thunderclap that rattled windows 20 miles away. A farmer outside Bryansk saw burning shards streak overhead, leaving contrails like meteor showers. In Smolensk, drivers stopped on the highway as fireballs tumbled down, sparking forest fires in 3 separate districts. In the cockpit of Ghost 12, alarm screamed. The pilots had seconds. No maneuver could save them. The left wing vaporized instantly, fuel tanks ignited, and the Spirit broke apart in midair. The crew's last transmission was a garbled burst of static. By 8:45, the B-2 was gone. Debris rained for 6 minutes. Charred fragments littered a 6-mile radius. A wing section crashed into a pine grove, igniting a blaze that consumed 14 acres. A blackened cockpit canopy punched through the roof of a farmhouse. Russian emergency lines logged 47 calls within half an hour. Reports of fires, explosions, falling wreckage. In Washington, the Pentagon's command center lit up. Red consoles flashed with a single chilling phrase: Raven down. For the first time in history, the United States had lost a B-2 Spirit to enemy fire. Analysts stared at satellite feeds in disbelief. To them, stealth was a shield no radar could pierce. Yet here was proof. The unseen hand of American air dominance had been burned into ash. On state TV, Moscow declared victory. Russia has destroyed an American stealth bomber violating our border, the announcer boasted, without showing footage. NATO commanders demanded answers. Was this a fluke? Or had Russia quietly mastered technology that the West believed impossible? The destruction of Ghost 12 was not just a tactical loss, it was a psychological earthquake. For 35 years, the B-2 Spirit symbolized the untouchable spear of U.S. power. Now it had been shattered in broad daylight. And yet, in Washington's war rooms, the discussion quickly shifted. America's answer would not be measured in one lost bomber. It would come as an entire arsenal unleashed. The question was simple: how exactly would they strike back? For the Pentagon, the loss of Ghost 12 was unthinkable. But to understand why this one bomber mattered so much, why its destruction shook Washington to the core, we need to go back. Conceived in the Cold War and rolled out in 1989, the B-2 Spirit was America's ultimate insurance policy against Russia. Each bomber cost more than $2 billion, a flying wing coated with radar-absorbent material, designed to appear no larger than a pigeon on enemy radar. Only 21 were ever built. In Kosovo, Iraq, and Libya, the Spirit struck hardened bunkers and air defense sites with impunity, often flying from Missouri to the target and back in a single mission. In the Pentagon, it was considered untouchable, the blade that could cut through any shield. Russia spent decades chasing a way to counter it. Their answer was the S-500 Prometei. Officially fielded in 2021, it was billed as the world's most advanced air defense system, boasting a radar range of 600 kilometers, the ability to track stealth aircraft, and intercept speeds up to Mach 14. On paper, it could hunt not only bombers, but hypersonic missiles and satellites. Yet skeptics dismiss these claims as exaggeration, pointing out Russia's mixed track record. In 1999, during the Kosovo War, Serbian forces using a decades-old S-125 Neva system managed to down an American F-117 Nighthawk, the only stealth aircraft lost in combat before 2025. That kill was seen as a fluke, a lucky radar operator and a predictable flight path. Ever since, Russian and Chinese systems had tried and failed to repeat the feat. Stealth remained king. But by late 2024, NATO and Russia were grinding against each other's nerves. Near the Black Sea, NATO fighters intercepted Russian jets almost weekly. U.S. reconnaissance drones pushed deeper along Russia's borders, shadowed by MiG-31s. And in Belarus, Russian armored brigades moved closer to the frontier. The air crackled with tension. One incident in particular changed the tone. In September 2024, a Russian commando unit attempted to sabotage a NATO drone hub in Latvia. They were detected early. The firefight left 19 dead, 12 Russians and 7 Latvians, and ended with Moscow denying involvement, even as bodies were returned across the border. It was a small skirmish, but it left NATO convinced that Moscow was willing to test the edge of open conflict. Against this backdrop, the B-2 Spirit continued its patrols, confident in its invisibility. American commanders believed no radar could hold it. Russian commanders believed otherwise. Somewhere inside Russia, deep in Smolensk forests, a new generation of radar silently waited, tuned to frequencies NATO had never faced before. And so the question loomed, unspoken but unavoidable. If stealth was untouchable for 3 decades, what had changed on April 15, 2025? April 16, 2025, 0340 a.m., Baltic Sea. The horizon was black, the water flat, the sky heavy with low clouds. On the USS Gerald R. Ford, sailors moved in silence across the deck, helmets catching the faint glow of floodlights. Inside the Combat Information Center, a single order crackled over secure comms from Washington. Execute War Plan Polaris. It was the signal. The United States would answer. A shudder ran through the escorting destroyers as their vertical launch tubes cracked open. Fire roared upward, smoke blew sideways in the wind, and 58 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles screamed into the night. They rose sharply, then bent east, hugging the waves at 600 miles per hour. In the USS Leyte Gulf, Lieutenant Mark Kavanaugh's voice cut across the tension. 58 birds away, all tracks green. From the Lithuanian forest below, villagers glimpsed white streaks ghosting overhead. Seconds later, thunder rolled like a storm breaking across the plains. By 3:58, the first Tomahawks crossed into Belarus. Each carried a 1,000-pound warhead guided by digital scene-matching sensors. They skimmed treetops, threading valleys, slipping under radar. At a command post near Brest, Belarusian soldiers had only seconds to react before the entire compound vanished in a tower of flame. Within minutes, missiles hammered 10 separate sites, radar arrays, ammunition depots, S-500 control vans. At Baranovichi Airfield, a row of Su-35 fighters erupted like tinder. In the Pentagon's watchroom, analysts marked targets in green, Alpha destroyed, Bravo burning. But defenses stirred. Russian interceptors clawed upward, missiles blossomed mid-air, and 8 Tomahawks never made it through. Civilians in Minsk later described fireworks in the sky, bright flashes where streaks had once been. It was proof the defenses still had teeth. Yet too many American warheads slipped through, and by the time the last Tomahawk detonated, runways were cratered, towers twisted into molten steel, and Belarus burned. The echoes had barely faded when the next wave arrived. 4:10 a.m. High above the clouds, 6 bombers moved as shadows. 4 B-2 Spirits and 2 B-21 Raiders, the newest of America's arsenal. Their mission, crush what lay hidden. Bay doors opened. 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators slid into the night. For a moment, they were silent. Then stabilizers snapped open, engines fired, and the bombs dived like spears. 4:14. The first struck near Gomel. Witnesses later said it was as if the earth swallowed lightning. The ground convulsed. Flames roared upward. and seismographs in Warsaw recorded the shock as an earthquake. Inside a subterranean S-500 command bunker, screens went black. Concrete split, steel supports bent. The last radio call was a broken phrase. Gomel, collapsing. Then silence. More penetrators followed. 6 detonated in succession, burrowing deep before bursting upward in molten fury. Bells shook loose from village churches. Civilians fled in terror, and fire boiled skyward like volcanic plumes. One bomber limped west, trailing smoke, its silhouette broken. Even America bled, yet the onslaught did not pause. 4:30 a.m. Northern Poland. Hidden launch fields flared alive. 30 Pershing II ballistic missiles tore upward, arcs of fire brighter than the moon. Villagers watching from meadows crossed themselves, whispering that Judgment Day had come. The missiles climbed, then curved eastward, Mach 8 and descending. To Russian radar operators in Kaluga, the screens filled with blips. 30 warheads inbound. Phone lines jammed, commands scrambled, and still the blips drew closer. 4:39. The first Pershing re-entered over Smolensk. Plasma cones glowed white-hot, visible like falling stars. Villagers described them as comets tearing the sky apart. Impact. A fuel depot vanished in a mushroom of fire, one explosion feeding another until half the horizon glowed orange. Satellites caught the bloom from orbit. Seconds later, Bryansk airfield took the second strike. Entire hangars lifted before collapsing in flame. Then Kaliningrad, where glass shattered across neighborhoods as the ground shook like thunder. In one Russian bunker, an officer watched 18 of the blips vanish from his scope. His hand trembled as he logged a single word: impact. By 4:45, the counterstrike had ended. The horizon over Belarus glowed red, the Baltic sky smeared with smoke. Fires raged from Smolensk to Minsk. Entire radar nets were shredded. Dozens of S-500 launchers lay blackened in fields. Highways out of Gomel and Minsk jammed with cars, civilians desperate to escape. Pillars of black smoke climbed miles into the sky. In Washington's National Military Command Center, maps lit with red X's. Some applauded, but the generals stayed silent. They knew the night had only opened a door. The question now was not what America had done. It was how Russia would answer. And as dawn spread across the burning landscape, another truth settled over both sides. The storm had only begun. April 16, 2025. 4:50 a.m., Western Russia. Sirens howled through bunkers cut into stone. Red warning lights spun as officers shouted over one another. Voices drowned in static and fear. The order was unmistakable. Activate every layer. Fire at will. On the outskirts of Smolensk, steel hatches slammed open. First one, then 10, then hundreds. Missiles clawed into the night, shaking the ground. Over 120 rockets, S-400s and S-500s, screamed skyward in desperate waves. Each launch lit the horizon like false dawn, trails of fire rising into the black. In a hardened control room, Major Sergei Antonov gripped the console. His headset crackled with reports, multiple tracks, Mach 3, Mach 6, closing fast, tracking lost, jamming at maximum. New salvo inbound, impact in 90 seconds. On his screens, hundreds of blips swarmed, too many to count. Closer to the ground, Panzer SM mobile cannons roared. Their twin 30mm Gatling barrels spun to life, each spewing 5,000 rounds a minute. Lines of red tracers stitched upward, forming a lattice of fire in the sky. Some struck true. One tomahawk burst in a scatter of sparks. Another cratered short of its target, molten edges glowing. Crews cheered briefly before the next wave surged overhead. In Bryansk, civilians stared upward as the battle unfolded like a nightmare. Dozens of contrails clawed into the heavens, colliding in blossoms of light. For moments, the sky resembled constellations tearing themselves apart, stars turning against the earth. High above, MiG-31 Foxhounds clawed for altitude, but their radars blinked and died, jammed by American growlers and satellites. Pilots saw only static. Control, this is Vector 1. No lock. Repeat, no lock. They're invisible! Ghosts. One fired anyway, an R-37 missile streaking into the void. It found nothing. In Moscow's Aerospace Defense Command, officers repeated a mantra. Layered shield. Short, medium, long range. Nothing penetrates all of it. Yet the radar told another story. For every missile stopped, 2 slipped through. For every bomber hunted, another vanished into the static. At 5:03, an S-500 battery near Kaluga managed a fleeting success. 2 Pershing II re-entry vehicles, shredded in flashes as bright as suns colliding. But 5 more streaked by, plasma trails glowing brighter than the moon. Minutes later, they slammed into the city, the ground convulsing under the blast. In Smolensk, Antonov slammed a fist onto the table. We're swatting arrows while the forest burns. Villagers thought the end had come. Children sobbed in cellars as glass rattled in frames. One farmer, clutching a phone, filmed what looked like a starfield come alive. Points of light arcing, colliding, disintegrating. To him, it was terrifying beauty. To crews inside the bunkers, it was catastrophe. Even as thousands of tons of steel filled the night, Antonov's screens did not clear. New blips multiplied. American missiles, stealth bombers, and drones poured in unending. By 5:15, half of Russia's long-range interceptors were gone. Crews scavenged launchers for spare parts, smoke choking their positions. Orders blurred, reports contradicted. Impact in Smolensk sector. No. Successful intercept. Negative. Detonation confirmed. Confusion grew heavier than the air itself. Pride in Russia's vaunted shield dissolved into helpless silence. Antonov stared at the screens, whispering to no one, "If this is our best, what will dawn reveal?" April 16th, 2025, 6:20 a.m. Smolensk Oblast. Dawn crept over the battlefield like a cruel witness. The fires still burned. The smoke still rose. Villagers stepping outside saw a horizon scarred with black columns. The world they had known only yesterday was gone. At Smolensk, the scale of devastation became visible. 7 impact craters pocked the landscape, each more than 100 feet across. A once bustling fuel depot was now a rolling inferno. Tanks ruptured and spewing fire. A pillar of smoke stretched 3,000 feet into the sky, visible to satellites in orbit. Further east, Kaluga Air Base lay in ruin. Its underground hangars, once thought impenetrable, had collapsed under American penetrators. Concrete slabs the size of apartment blocks jutted upward at broken angles. Beneath the rubble were the charred remains of 23 fighter jets, Su-35s and Su-57s, destroyed before ever leaving the ground. The pride of Russia's air fleet was reduced to twisted aluminum and scorched wings poking through collapsed hangars. Pilots who had trained for years never reached their cockpits. Their barracks were flattened in the shockwaves. By mid-morning, crude casualty counts filtered through what remained of Russia's communications. Over 3,000 dead or wounded overnight. Whole units had been erased. Others were reduced to half their fighting strength. Medics worked in makeshift triage centers, using torn uniforms as bandages. Trucks ferried the wounded away, but many never reached hospitals. In Smolensk, an entire S-500 crew was buried in its bunker. In Bryansk, survivors dug shallow graves as fires still smoldered. Convoys of burned-out vehicles lined the roads, some still smoldering, their occupants unrecognizable. The command structure itself had collapsed. Fiber optic lines were severed, satellite links jammed, hardened bunkers cracked open. Generals who once barked orders across vast networks were now reduced to runners carrying handwritten notes and soldiers shouting into hand radios with fading batteries. From the sky, American drones captured everything. Grainy infrared images showed fields littered with scorched SAM launchers, their tubes blackened and bent. Columns of refugees stretched along roads, cars mixed with horse-drawn carts. Here and there, soldiers stumbled through smoke, cradling the wounded. The footage was broadcast in situation rooms across Washington, Brussels, and London. Analysts circled the craters, labeled the destroyed aircraft, and counted the convoys of wounded. The Pentagon's screens glowed with images of a battlefield that looked less like a military installation and more like a graveyard. What had once been called the most advanced air defense network on Earth was reduced to burning hulks, its radars blinded, its interceptors exhausted, its launchers gutted. Even the crews knew the shield was broken. Russia's military might had taken its worst blow since the Second World War. Yet even in that moment of destruction, the larger question loomed. The real consequence wasn't just military, it was geopolitical. If America could shatter Russia's defenses in a single night, how would the rest of the world respond? April 16, 2025, noon, Washington and Moscow. As smoke still curled above Smolensk and Kaluga, the world was already measuring the cost. The myth of Russia's impenetrable defenses had been erased in a single night. Systems once paraded with pride, the S-400, the S-500, the radars said to see the unseen, were now wrecks, captured in grainy drone footage and satellite passes. In Moscow, the silence spoke louder than words. No speeches, no vows of revenge, only clipped announcements of temporary setbacks and strategic pauses. Inside bunkers, the truth was whispered more bluntly. The shield had failed. Washington's voice, by contrast, was cold and precise. Pentagon officials laid maps across long tables, red X's marking ruined batteries. There was no boasting, no celebration, only the deliberate tone of a power making its point. Stealth and precision had outmatched mass and bravado. The effect rippled outward. NATO's eastern members, long on edge, drew confidence from the spectacle. "We have proof now," a Lithuanian minister told reporters. "The alliance can protect us, and if need be, it can punish." In Beijing, Beijing, military analysts dissected satellite images frame by frame, testing American methods against Chinese doctrine. In Tehran, commanders asked uneasy questions. If Russia's vaunted shield could be gutted in hours, what hope had theirs? What defenses could be trusted when the strongest had crumbled? The war had expanded beyond the battlefield. It had become a global demonstration, every nation taking notes, every strategist revising assumptions. Across America, veterans of Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan followed events with heavy eyes. They had seen it before, the arc of hubris, the fall that always came. Every empire thinks it's untouchable, one retired colonel said quietly, until the night it isn't. Old footage resurfaced, the downing of an F-117 in 1999, the complacency before 9/11, the confidence before Fallujah. History echoed, louder now, with higher stakes. By dusk, the meaning was unavoidable. Modern war was no longer about numbers, slogans, or parades. It was silence and signals, machines unseen until they struck, fire falling faster than reaction. The ruins of Smolensk and Kaluga stood not only as scars of Russia's failure, but as warnings carved into stone and steel. Modern war leaves no refuge, no fortress unbreakable. Steel, fire, and silence remind every nation of the same truth. Miscalculation carries a price. The downing of a single B-2 could have been a tragedy, but it became the spark for something far greater. America's response was instant. Air bases reduced to craters, Russia's shield torn apart. In one night, the balance shifted, and the world saw that no defense is unbreakable. Stealth and silence had redrawn the battlefield. Share your thoughts below, and join me in the next chapter as we follow the aftermath of a war that no one, not even its architects, can fully control.